So then, let's now take a look at the car in a bit more detail, starting with the outside. So as you can see, it's fairly unremarkable looking, but it's not actually as bad as I expected. It looks kind of growing on me a little bit actually. It's quite a small car. It's kind of like the original Mini, although it's actually bigger inside and outside than the Mini. Similar in width though. The wheels are pretty small, and that can mean the handling is a bit skittish, especially at higher speeds, but there's not much you can do about that. Interior space is okay, but nothing remarkable. It's got a boot, it's got lights, it's got a number plate, and if you look underneath, the underpinnings are pretty cheap. The rear anti-roll bar is just a straight bar, and there are some areas starting to rust here, which I'll have to treat to get it through the winter months. Although for a 13-year-old, 14-year-old car now, it's in pretty good condition. There's not too much structural rust, the brakes work okay, and there's not too much to complain about. For under £700, I'm pretty impressed. So then, onto the engine. And as you can see, mine's got a leaking cam cover gasket. Not a major issue. At some point, I'll get this cover off, put a new one on, and clean it all up. Again, it's not looking too bad for a 14-year-old car really. A little bit of rust around some of the bulkhead areas, but I should be able to treat that before it gets too bad. And apart from that, it runs quite smoothly and it's pretty good. It's a very small engine. I believe it's a 4-cylinder. You can see there's 4 spark plugs, 1, 2, 3, and then 4 under there. It's got all the normal engine components as you would expect. Apart from that, there's not too much to really say about it. All very easily accessible, easily maintainable, and should be fairly cheap to maintain and repair. Onto the inside, and as you can see, it's a sort of interior your gran might be used to. When I first sat in this, I thought it was pretty horrific. Seats, pretty cheap. The interior, a bit of a horrible grey, bluey, browny colour. That's actually the factory stereo unit, completely different colour to the rest of the car. But I must say, like all the other aspects of this car, it's really grown on me in my first week of commuting. The steering wheel is quite small, I'm 6'1", but I'm getting used to it now. And the room down by the pedals can also be a little bit cramped, but again, I'm getting used to that too. As I'm not really going to intend driving this for more than about an hour at a time, I can definitely live with that. The stereo, it's an old radio cassette, but it works pretty well, better than some other old cars I've had. And the speakers, you only get 2, 1 in each corner of the dash. They're quite small, they're adequate for listening to the radio, but not much else. They'll be one of the first things I upgrade. In the back, forgive me for all the junk, there's wide seats for 2, and it comes with heated rear windscreen, rear wiper. Actually a reasonable amount of features for a very cheap budget car that's quite old now. One point to add though is although it does have all this interior space, this vehicle really seems to come into its own for me when it's only you in it. I think if you loaded it down with any more weight or any more people, the performance might suffer and you might grow to dislike this car quite a lot. Taking a bit of a closer look at the heating system, this is the oldest generation of Alto that's easily on sale at the moment, and it's got this old-fashioned sort of toggle system, which I actually really like. I like the way it's kind of almost digital in that it's got exact settings. It clicks quite nicely into place, and it's easy to see at an instant glance what your settings are. Later models have switched to the more traditional twisty dials. I actually prefer these older versions, and it puts out a lot of heat. Yeah, after about 5 minutes warming up in the morning, everything's defrosted, and it can get very warm inside. You can direct lots of nice warm air down to your feet. It's really good. Now you might think I'm really dwelling on the detail here, but I've had cars that are 10 years newer than this and many thousands of pounds more expensive that can't get basic things like heating and aircon correct. Taking another look at the seats, this is the GL version no less, which I presume is a bit up from the base model. The seats are alright if style isn't really your thing. I do find they seem to tip me into the middle of the car a bit, which I find a little uncomfortable, but again, I can live with that. Gear stick is a standard affair. When I first got into this car, that was the thing that made me really think, what the hell have I just bought? It kind of wobbles all over the place even when it's not in gear. You push the clutch down, put it into first, and it's kind of hard to tell that it's even in gear sometimes because there's so much movement. The other gears seem to slot in a little bit better, and reverse, again, it can be a little bit hard to find. However, after 200, 250 miles of driving, I'm used to it. And it rarely frustrates me now. It's just one of the quirks that I accept with this little car. On the dash you get a speedo and a rev limiter, temperature and fuel gauges, they all seem to work pretty well, and both of the main gauges are of course rather optimistic. I don't think you'll see 110 miles an hour or 6,000 to 7,000 RPM on this. The most I've ever got it up to is about 4,000 or 5,000 RPM and about 85 miles an hour, but at that point the engine and everything was shaking to quite scary degrees. This thing's really comfortable at sort of 65, 75 for short periods. So I hope you found this short introduction useful. I really do think this is the ultimate commuter mobile, unless you want to spend many thousands of pounds more on something newer and a bit more advanced. I'm going to use this as a little bit of a project car, not spending too much money on it, but I'm going to upgrade the stereo, do a bit of work on the underside and a bit on the engine, so keep an eye out on my channel for more videos to follow. Enjoy the rest of your day and thanks for watching.